Did UDBA kill a man for ruining a marriage? To be honest, I don't have the answer, but the story is worth telling. It has famous painter, Tito, and Yugoslav Secret Service involved. What was UDBA? First, I have to explain what was OZNA. In 1944, OZNA was established in Yugoslavia as a security agency. OZNA is acronym for Odeljenje za zaštitu naroda. English, the Department for People's Protection. Immediately after the World War II, OZNA arrested a huge number of people. Many lived in fear of OZNA. There is a popular saying, OZNA sve dozna, English, OZNA finds out everything. In 1946, OZNA disbanded, but continued living in the minds of Yugoslavians. In 1946, OZNA was partitioned into two branches, UDBA and KOS. KOS is acronym for Kontraobaveštajna služba, English, Counterintelligence Office. They were military security agency, rarely mentioned. UDBA was real successor to OZNA. UDBA is acronym for Uprava državne bezbednosti, English, State Security Administration. This was civil security agency. UDBA existed between 1946 and 1991. UDBA disappeared after the fall of communism. Even after all this time, people still mention OZNA and UDBA in everyday conversations. They became synonyms for surveillance, covert operations, assassinations. Today, Serbian security agency is called DB, short for Državna bezbednost, English, State Security. UDBA used fear to control the masses. There are a million unverified stories about UDBA. People often exaggerate UDBA's power. UDBA was less brutal than secret services from other communist countries. UDBA is suspected of ordering 200 assassinations worldwide. This would mean they killed 4 to 5 people per year. The victims were Ustaše and Chetnik exiles who were seen as enemies of the regime. But the stories about UDBA claimed they killed much more people through staged suicides, suspicious car and plane accidents. People were also suspicious of sudden heart attacks. Can we prove that all these deaths were actual assassinations? No, because too much time had passed. There is one story that caught my attention. It involved suspicious suicide, cheating, art world, and high politics. What's not to love? We should start with Petar Lubarda. He wasn't the victim in the story, but he was the man whose marriage was ruined. Who was Lubarda? Lubarda was one of the most famous Yugoslav painters outside Yugoslavia. Lubarda was born in 1907 in Montenegro. In 1925, Lubarda moved to Belgrade to study art. The very next year, he went to Paris to study at Académie des Beaux-Arts. In 1927 and 1929, he had art exhibitions in Paris and Rome. Over the years, Lubarda won international prizes like Guggenheim National Award in New York and Grand Prix at World Exhibit in Paris. Lubarda's life was marked by World War II. He was in German captivity between 1941 and 1944. In 1945, partisans executed Lubarda's father, who was officer of the Royal Army. Lubarda was blacklisted as the son of the enemy. Lubarda's first wife was art historian, and she left him because he was blacklisted. Staying married to him would mean end of her career. How was Lubarda blacklisted? He was allowed to work, but he had problems finding canvases and paint. Pro-regime painters were given ateliers for free. Lubarda had to paint in his small apartment. Some would say this doesn't sound too bad. Lubarda still worked as art teacher in academies in Belgrade and Cetinje, Montenegro. In other communist countries, Lubarda would have had harsher treatment. Lubarda's private life was a disaster. He had a short relationship with a woman from Czechoslovakia. They had a stillborn baby, which would be Lubarda's only child. Plus, Lubarda's brother died. I don't know why, but all painters seem to have tragic lives. Lubarda was down when he met Vera Protic. She was an art student and 17 years younger than Lubarda. They got married. The story paints Vera in very negative light. The narrative is that Vera married Lubarda only because he was a famous artist. I don't know if this is true. The fact is that Lubarda was in love with Vera. In 1957, UDBA came to Lubarda's tiny apartment. He was told to pack his bags. Lubarda thought that he was being arrested. In fact, UDBA came to move Lubarda to a villa in Dedinje. Dedinje is an elite neighborhood in Belgrade. Houses in Dedinje were reserved for politicians and other VIPs. Lubarda was moved to a house near where Tito lived. What caused this huge change in Lubarda's life? A group of imported foreigners was going to visit Yugoslavia. They expressed wish to see Lubarda's atelier. Tito knew he had to act fast. He couldn't let foreigners see in what conditions Lubarda worked. Tito decided to move Lubarda near him in order to create a false picture. Foreigners had to believe how Yugoslav regime takes good care of artists. Tito was very smart and knew how PR worked. Members of UDBA were quick to follow Tito's orders. Army officer Govedarica was moved out of the villa and given a luxurious apartment instead. Govedarica was happy because the villa had no heating. But Vera was happy with the villa even without heating. Lubarda was instructed by UDBA to say that he lived in the house for 3 years. The foreigners were happy with the visit. Lubarda was allowed to stay in the villa. The life seemed good. Until unnamed Montenegrin became the friend of the Lubarda couple. We don't know any details about the man. Was he an old friend of Lubarda, since Lubarda was also from Montenegro? Was he a new neighbor in Dedinje? Or was he another artist? We can only speculate. Vera liked the attention she got from the Montenegrin. In 1962, Vera and her lover spent summer together in Croatia. Vera asked Lubarda for divorce. The divorce was quick. Vera's action tells me she was truly in love with the Montenegrin. Why else leave apparently good marriage to a famous person? Vera, as Lubarda's wife, had many benefits. Lubarda was devastated by the divorce. He stopped painting and wrote long letters to Vera. Lubarda also started studying Hindu mysticism. Then Vera's lover suddenly died. According to the gossip, he jumped from Palata Albania, English Palace Albania. Palata Albania is first Belgrade skyscraper. It was named after a small 19th century kafana that stood there. Kafana is a type of restaurant with live music. Some speculated that UDBA killed Vera's lover. They did it to force Vera to return to Lubarda. Lubarda would recover if he had his ex-wife back. Would UDBA do something like this? The chances are 50-50. Due to language and other barriers, very few artists from Yugoslavia made international careers. Yugoslavia couldn't afford to lose Lubarda. He was one of the few who made it big. Plus, Lubarda was from Montenegro. Montenegrins are known for being sailors and highlanders. They are not known for art. Yugoslav motto was brotherhood and unity. Montenegrins had to have representatives in all spheres of the society, including art. Lubarda couldn't be allowed to retire because Montenegrins had no replacement for him. How could regime force Lubarda to work? He already lost whom he loved most. The regime had nothing to blackmail Lubarda with. Killing Vera's lover seems like the easiest solution. He wasn't anyone important as far as we could tell. Why do I have doubts? Since we don't know the identity of the lover, there could be valid reasons for him to take his own life. In early 1960s, cancer was death sentence. Many people chose suicide rather than to suffer in pain. The man could have been depressed. He could have suffered personal loss, like death of a child. There is also a chance that he was drunk or high on drugs when he fell. Vera returned to Lubarda and they remarried in 1964. Lubarda went back to painting and won many more awards. Lubarda died in 1974, leaving all his paintings to the state. Vera was allowed to stay in the villa. She was supposed to remain there until her death. The Lubarda's home was supposed to be open for public. Vera refused to let anyone in and sued the state. Things became ugly. The state accused Vera of selling the paintings. Vera was forcefully moved out of the house. She was taken to homeless shelter. Vera died in the shelter in 2008. She is remembered as evil femme fatale. Peter Lubarda is still celebrated for his art. He is often mentioned in the newspapers. Lubarda's legacy is still much alive, almost 50 years since his death. And what about UDBA? I do believe that many stories about UDBA were based on reality. The problem is how to distinguish facts from fiction. Now, UDBA is often used to spice up the story. In recent decades, many public figures claimed to have been victims of persecution by UDBA. Some of them had amazing careers in communist Yugoslavia. I really cannot see how they were persecuted. UDBA became omnipotent boogeyman. People say things like, I didn't graduate from university because of UDBA. I don't know if these stories are true. But remember, Ozna sve dozna.